Okay, so this is order of operations, just starting with the review. You've probably heard many different acronyms and ways of memorizing these, like please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. PEMDAS is another one. I use something very similar called GEMDAS just because we have more than parentheses, we have grouping. So we have parentheses here, braces here, brackets here. So know the difference between them. So if I'm pointing to some problem, you can say, oh yeah, the parentheses, the brackets, the braces. Okay. So for instance, on number 1, first thing is parentheses. So you just do 8 minus 2, put 6. And then after that, the multiplication, 5 times 6 is 30. Okay. And then do 6 plus 30 is 36. Now generally I like everything to be lined up vertically, so the 36 would be underneath. Just wasn't enough room. But when you do your work, please make it vertical. Notice how I line up the 6's, the part that I didn't really work on until the very end. They all line up with each other, so I can easily see they're not being changed. I'm not working on that. The same thing with the pluses. Try to line up everything vertically as neatly as possible. It doesn't always work out perfectly, but you want to do it like this. Remember, showing work is not for you. Partly for you, but not fully just for you. Meaning if you're an engineer designing an engine on a car, you need to show all your steps and all your work so when you give it to the people that are working on the exhaust, they can see how you did everything and make sure their work and what they build will work on the engine. So it's not just to make sure, well, maybe you got the right steps if you show all your work, but somebody else needs to understand it. Mainly me right now, and each other when you're talking about it, like, where'd you get that from? And if you just put just the answer, or if you put a little bit of work in the answer, nobody can read it and understand what you did. Therefore, it doesn't really count. And this is actually a Common Core standard to show your work. You will be graded on this. Okay. So you want to make sure you do it. It's not optional. So like this problem has like 3 steps. If you just put the answer only, you got 1 out of 3 on that problem. It's correct, you got that 1 step right, you got the last step, but you didn't have everything in between. So algebra is really about showing the work and showing the steps so anybody can understand. Another way of looking at it is, you need to teach somebody this that doesn't know how to do it. If you just show them the question and the answer, they're going to be like, I can't do that by myself. Just by seeing the answer, I need to see how you did it. So everything you write down, imagine you're teaching somebody younger than you how to do it, and that will let you guide you on what you need to write down, how much you should write down. I need to see steps. That's called algebra. Showing steps is the same as algebra. I do not need to see arithmetic. So if we had a problem that had like, stuff that's in the hundreds, thousands, and decimals, I don't need to see off to the side like 13.3 plus 117.2, and you're writing it out and lining up decimals. I don't need to see any of that. That's arithmetic. You can use a calculator for that. I need to see algebra, which is just what you see here only, the steps. All right, another thing we have after that is exponents. So a little thing that's kind of left off the GEMDAS, PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, is that square roots are also exponents. So if you had a square root in order of operation problem, make sure you do it with exponents. Now if you didn't know that, that's something you write down. So even though it's not on the screen, even though and you didn't know it, you still write it down and take notes. That's how you actively take notes. It's not just copying the screen and saying I'm taking notes. You have to take things I didn't know square roots was, you did that at the exponent level in order of operations. I didn't know that. You need to write that to yourself, write a note to yourself. Okay, so first thing we do 5 to the second power, which is the same as 5 times 5, 25. Then we do multiplication. 3 times 25 is 75. And then lastly, do 2 plus 75 is 77. And again, notice how the part that I did not work on is completely lined up as I go through the problem. Makes it simple to see what is done in each step, easier to follow. This is a good practice, not to get the right answer, but so that when we get to difficult problems, you're used to making things neat. And when they get complicated, you can easily find mistakes. Like, okay, did I do this step right? Because I know this should be equal to this. Does 5 to the second equal 25? Yes, so I know that's right. It's just good habits, so when we get to the harder stuff, it'll work. Okay, on number 3, what's the first step? Should I do 16 divided by 2, or should I do 2 times 4? So first step is to divide. So it's one of those things that if you're not careful, you might think that multiply then divide, but it's really multiply, divide from left to right. So keep that in mind. We have the grouping, right? Parentheses, braces, and brackets. We have exponents. And then we have multiply and divide, but these happen not one after the other, but simultaneously from left to right. Same thing with adding and subtracting. Make sure you do these from left to right as they appear. It's very easy to think multiply everything and then divide everything. So we get 16 divided by 2 is 8, and then 8 times 4 is 32. Definitely prefer you to use a dot over an x if you're multiplying. In algebra, you never use an x as multiplication. It's only for a variable. Okay, and of course, add, subtract, same thing. But first, we got to do the multiplication. 2 times 4 first. That's 8. Notice how everything else I just bring down. So most of your work is copying down what you didn't do yet, especially at the beginning of the problem. Get used to that. Don't think that's a waste of time or that's too much work. I know some people say, but that's going to take so much longer. And I say, okay, go ahead and do it the long way. Let's time how long it takes. All right, that took 3 seconds. Don't lose your grade and miss out on stuff because you think 2 seconds, 3 seconds of writing is too much to ask. Just write out all the steps. Okay, you'll be happy later when things are easier because you're writing everything out. All right, there we go. And of course, you can do commutative here. You can move things around if you wanted to. 10 minus 3 is 7. 7 plus 8 is 15. So GEMDAS. Very similar to PEMDAS, but with grouping instead of parentheses. All right, not too bad, right? Okay. So I'm going to step up the rigor just a little bit, have you guys work on some problems with each other. Okay. Go ahead and leave yourself space to do all those. You will notice here that you have 2 sets of grouping. Start on the inside, work your way out. Another small rule you might want to make a note of in your notebook where you're taking notes. If you have multiple parentheses, start on the inside, work your way out. If you have fractions or division, this is division bar as opposed to division sign, assume there are parentheses on the top and bottom. You must simplify the top and the bottom first, and then do the division last. All right, give you a second to work on those. Of course, work on number 1, check with somebody. Okay, I think I got it. Work on number 2, then check with somebody. Don't do all 4. Check with somebody and realize you made the same mistake on 3 of the problems. And if you would have just corrected the mistake on the first time, you wouldn't have made it 2 more times after that. So check as you go, not at the very end. All right. So number 1, first step is the parentheses. Within the parentheses, we have the multiplication and addition. So we'll do the multiplication first, which is 3 times 6. And the best I can on here, I was trying to line things up. So ideally, you like the 4 straight down, the addition sign straight down, everything to line up vertically as much as possible. It won't always be perfect, though. Ready? Okay. What's left in the parentheses? Got to do that next. 4 plus 18. 22. And now that we can't do anything more in the parentheses, we can start multiplying 22 times 2. And then 44 minus 10, last step. And again, ideally, the equal 34 would be vertically aligned at the very bottom. Please circle or box that answer as well. Number 2, right below, we have 2 sets of grouping. We have the parentheses on the inside, brackets on the outside. Start on the inside. And remember, the first step, oops, divided by, sign got got messed up. The first step is really copying a lot of stuff down that you didn't do. It's really repetitive. That's okay. It should be. Next thing, do 18 divided by 6, which is 3. Then do 2 times 3, which is 6. And then now 24 minus 18, 6 is the 18. And try to put the 18 down below so it all lines up. And you can count like how many points this would be worth. This would be, well, Mr. Hodgins showing me 1, 2, 3, 4 steps for the final answer. If you had 3 of those steps, then you would get a 3 out of 4. Okay? We count each step as important as the other. So it's not like the answer. Well, if you got the answer but you're missing some steps, it's still really good. We just count it the same. So algebra is about showing steps, not about just having that final answer and only worrying about that. Okay, so here we go. Here we got some division in the middle first. 36 divided by 4. Later on, I'll actually say this as this is negative 36 divided by 4, and it equals negative 9. It's a little bit easier later on in algebra if we start thinking of these subtraction signs as negative signs. It makes things a little clearer because you won't be doing that. Well, where did that negative come from? Well, it's a subtraction sign, but it's also a negative sign. It's not just showing up randomly. And of course, here we can kind of do things commutative. You could do like 8 plus 5 minus 9, if that's easier for you. Get your final answer. This one, I wouldn't really require you to show that this step in the middle. If you can, you should be able to do 8 minus 9 plus 5 and get 4 and not have to have that intermediate step. As I mentioned earlier on number 4, it's assumed when you have fractions that there are parentheses on the top and bottom. Meaning before you do anything with between the top and bottom, you simplify the entire top and the entire bottom. Most people will do this just naturally. Okay, so simplify the top, simplify the bottom, and you'll get 7. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 8 is 28. That's on the top. And 10 minus 6 is 4. That's on the bottom. 28 divided by 4 is 7. Remember, fractions are division. Right? So if you had a 1/2 as a fraction, that means 1 divided by 2. Like back in the day in elementary, you said like 1 apple divided by 2 people. How much do these people get? They get a half. Right? So a fraction is division. So that's you might want to keep that in mind for the order of operations. My marker. Okay. Oh, there it is. When it comes right here, don't forget that division is also fractions. So you can have divided by, but also it can be division bar. Division sign, division bar. Okay. So that's the gist of it. That gives you more than enough. I usually like to give you problems that are similar to the homework, but maybe a little bit harder. So when you get the homework, you're like, okay, this is easy. You know, I did those harder problems. These seem easy. It's kind of a psychological thing to help yourself out. So let me pass those out. And we'll get started. I'll review the format real fast so you know what's expected. So, of course, the first ones are going to be simpler. Focus on format and the details I've been going over. So, let's see here. So, like here, if you just looked at this and said, this is 39, did it like that, what would be incorrect about that as far as the format goes? Okay. So, number 1, I didn't do it vertically. Number 2, I didn't show any work. Okay? So you must have both of those done to get full credit. Okay, so I would say this equals 3 times 13, parentheses, and then that equals 3 times 13 is 39. And then please box or circle your answer. So that one can be considered full credit. I know some people probably got the worksheet, are writing it out, and you already were doing it format wrong. Okay. And this is more so later on when we're doing more difficult problems, we're used to writing things organized. So here we do